In a short amount of time, this country is going to celebrate quite a tremendous milestone. 250 years of existence and independence. While that is not as long as some countries throughout history, it is longer than quite a lot of other countries that have existed. It's safe to say the United States has established itself within the halls of history. As of 2026, the United Nations, the global governing body, has 193 member nations. In other words, these are countries that have received universal recognition. There are a few others that are partially recognized, like Palestine and Taiwan, but we're going to focus on one specific country out of these 193 nations, and that is my country, the United States of America. Imagine, it's the night of July 3rd, 1776. One of the founding fathers who is going to sign the Declaration of Independence tomorrow is sitting on the edge of his bed contemplating the different outcomes of what will happen if he does sign the document declaring U.S. independence. If he does sign it and the revolution ends in failure, he risks getting caught by the British authorities and being publicly hung for treason, losing all his worldly possessions, and eventually being forgotten by history. However, the promises of a new nation are exciting, and this creates great internal conflict within him. Let's say we can travel back in time magically to that specific night in 1776 and appear in front of this founding father. We were given the ability to time travel, but there is no time to explain it, as he asks what is going on. At first, he was contemplating that it could perhaps be an angel sent from the Lord or a vision conjured up by evil spirits, but we reassure him, no, I'm just an American from the year 2026. I'm coming here from 250 years in the future to tell you what America is like and why you should ultimately choose to vote for independence and sign the Declaration of Independence. First, let's just start with how much the country has changed over the last couple centuries. The United States has been transformed from a fledgling state on the east coast of North America to a global superpower with a North American empire comprised of hundreds of millions of people and 50 states. Yep, that's right, there are 37 more states, all with their own unique identities and cultures, plus a few territories. Let's look at some of the stuff on the surface, shall we? The United States of America is the third largest country on Earth in terms of population and land area. It stretches from ocean to ocean to ocean. It has every geographical, biome, and climate classification you could imagine. Even though it comes in at a distant third in population behind India and China, who both roughly have 1.5 billion people, the US is estimated to have 342 million people. What does the average American look like in 2026? What would they look like if you picked one out of those 342 million people? While using 2020 census data as well as recent trends, the population roughly comes out to this: 57% white, 20% Hispanic, 13% Black, 6% Asian, 1% each for Native Americans and Pacific Islanders, and 2% for mixed race folk. Now I put an asterisk next to Hispanic because the adjective Hispanic can cover any race. All of these people in this picture could be considered Hispanic Latino. Considering Mexico's population is approximately 70% indigenous, and most of the immigrants that come from Mexico and Central America are probably indigenous anyway, add a good 15% to Native Americans and a few percentage points to the other races, and you'll probably have a more accurate picture. While America is racially diverse, each race itself is remarkably diverse in itself. In 1776, most white people were of British descent. Since then, the U.S. has acquired territory with a French, Spanish, and Russian presence. The founding fathers will have little to no idea what Germans and Italians are if we mention those countries to them because, well, they didn't exist in 1776. Neither country would come into existence until nearly 100 years later in the 1870s. However, the central U.S. saw large waves of German immigrants, or people who came from areas that would become Germany, during the 1840s. Even though Italy didn't exist as a country, if it had a colony in the Americas, the states of New York and New Jersey would probably be it. Large groups of Scandinavians would move to the Great Lakes region in the 19th century. If there is an ethnic, racial, or religious group that exists on Earth, you can guarantee that at least some members of that group will reside within the United States. And I think that is one of the most beautiful things about this country. The United States has grown to be one of the most ethnically, religiously, and racially diverse countries on Earth. As you can imagine, this large, vast country is home to many smaller regions with their own identities. You have the Northeast, where it all began 250 years ago. The South, the rebellious breakaway region that needs to be kept in line, who also has funky accents. The Great Lakes region, the states, that are surrounding the Great Lakes. The Midwest and the Great Plains, there is always lots of discussion about where one region ends and the other begins. It's all just a huge flat region comprised of mostly farms and small towns. The Great Plains is also known as America's heartland. You have the Southwest, which they want to make clear they are not part of what is considered the South. The Southwest is a completely different region in terms of demographics, climate, and culture. Then we have the Mountain West and the Pacific Northwest. Both regions are really mountainous, it's just the first one is more inland and known for its conservative politics, while the Pacific Northwest is known for its more liberal policies. We also have Alaska. It's so huge, it needs its own region. That's the Siberia of the United States. It's also the largest state in the country. Finally, we have Hawaii and the Pacific. These regions have formed their own identities over the decades and offer their own unique experiences for the world to enjoy. What does the average American sound like? I've put Americans in 3 broad language categories. The first group and the largest group Americans belong to is the group that speaks English. And Americans have developed a whole lot of slang over the years into their English vocabulary. There are also plenty of unique accents from New York to the South to California. Roughly 1 in 6 Americans speak Spanish as a primary language. The United States is actually the world's second largest Spanish-speaking country behind only Mexico. This is a result of a mix of generations of immigration to the United States from its southern neighbors, plus the history of hundreds of years of Spanish colonization in parts of the United States, including Florida, Texas, and the American Southwest, as well as Puerto Rico and the island of Guam. The third and final group is comprised of individuals who speak an indigenous language or a language related to their immigration status. There are hundreds of Native American languages still alive and still being spoken. And 2 tribes go as far as having their own writing systems. We can't forget about all of the immigrants plus their descendants and the communities they reside in who also speak their own languages. I think the best example of these are the towns comprised of Asian immigrants. Cities like Chinatown, Koreatown, Little Tokyo, or in Chicago you have the Polish community, or New York, Italians. Like we mentioned earlier with race, the United States is also linguistically diverse. While the amount of religious folks have decreased in the U.S., there is still a large group of Americans who follow religion. The largest religion is Christianity, with Protestants being the largest group. These can further be broken down into various groups. The United States is home to a considerable Jewish population. After the infamous Holocaust during World War II, any Jews left alive, most Jews left alive decided to immigrate either to Israel or the United States. Jews make up 2% of the population in the U.S. I know 2% seems statistically insignificant. However, that makes the U.S. the only country on earth other than Israel to have more than 1% of the population be Jewish. Some outsiders and non-religious Americans have pointed out that at times the U.S. and Israel seem to have an irrational relationship. Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and many other religions also have a sizable following within the country. All of this is thanks to the freedom of religion clause in the Constitution. Despite waning church attendance, the United States, I believe, remains a religious and God-fearing country. The United States has produced a wide variety in entertainment to satisfy the masses, both at home and abroad. Since the advent of radio at the turn of the 20th century, America has routinely produced world-renowned artists, too many to mention in this video. Even though film wasn't invented in the US, America's Hollywood has been the source of entertainment for decades. Over the decades, the mediums of entertainment may have changed, but Americans have continued to use their talents and freedom to entertain people for generations. The United States is known for having a large number of obese people. That is a result of one of the main achievements of the United States, the ability for the country to produce abundant quantities of food. But unfortunately, obesity is one of those negative side effects. There is another segment of the population that is athletic and or involved in sports. The 5 most popular sports are contact football. American football, as it is called, is the country's most popular sport. Known for its violent nature and the ball's unique shape, the Super Bowl alone has over 100 million viewers. Now, basketball arguably is a split between the US and Canada. The inventor, James Naismith, is a Canadian. However, the sport was first played in Massachusetts and was played by Americans. So I think both countries should get credit for inventing the game. Baseball is considered to be the original American pastime, developed in the United States sometime during the Civil War, which was in the 1860s. Professional clubs began to be founded in the latter half of the 19th century, and before you know it, millions of Americans were watching and following the sport of baseball by 1900. The sport of hockey was actually invented in Canada. However, in many northern US states and even in parts of more warmer climates, millions of Americans that avidly follow hockey, and even though our neighbors to the north claim that they are number one at that sport, Americans over the decades have shown that they are more than capable of competing on the ice. Actually, within the last 30 years, it's been American hockey clubs in the NHL, the National Hockey League, that have won the majority of the championships. Anyway, I think finally we should mention the United States achievements in the Olympics. The Olympics first began in Greece thousands of years ago, inviting multiple city-states to play games, and then they were abandoned for thousands of years. However, in 1896, they were restarted again in France, and on a 4-year basis since then, with a few exceptions, the Olympics have been held in various cities around the world, including several here in the United States, including Los Angeles, 3 times, matter of fact, once in Atlanta and once in St. Louis. On those podiums where the representatives from their respective countries receive their gold, silver, or bronze medals. Usually, the person standing on the gold section of the podium is an American, and if they're not, they're at least standing on one of the other 2 podiums. These are impressive achievements because American successes have been continued repeatedly, Olympics after Olympics. Whether it is global athletic competitions or to events held in local areas across the country, Americans compete competitively and they have made their mark in the world of sports. America is and has been home to many scientists. We would need a separate video to help acknowledge all the contributions to scientific advancement in medicine, telecommunications, commercial energy consumption and production, agriculture, space exploration, etc. And then there are the examples of it wasn't actually invented in the US, but an American or somebody who immigrated to the US came along and more or less perfected it in the United States. I think creating a country and government that fostered an environment of innovation was one of the Founding Fathers' greatest and most brilliant achievements. As I mentioned earlier, the United States is a massive, vast country. It's normal to have members of a family scattered throughout the country, thousands of miles apart. That is why, over the generations, it's been Americans who have developed ways to travel faster and safer across the country. From trains and railways, to the advent of the horseless carriage at the end of the 19th century, to the Wright brothers and their aircraft, the Kitty Hawk in 1905, to traveling to the cosmos. Americans have developed new, quicker, safer ways to travel. Why should I even mention these facts? The different modes of travel have quite literally transformed how American cities and states have grown and developed compared to cities in the old world. American cities are larger and less compact due to all of the highways constructed. European cities kinda spontaneously sprouted up while American cities were built along trails, then railways, and finally highways and interstates. Americans have contributed to the development of travel and have revolutionized travel for everyone all over the world. Now, let's talk about the neighbors. Because even though this video is about America, I think our neighbors have contributed a lot to the American identity. The US only has 2 direct land borders with 2 countries. While North America was home to several European colonies and countless Native American tribes, the founding fathers may have worried that the United States would come into conflict with many adversaries. Well, perhaps to their surprise, only 3 large countries ended up coming into existence. These countries include the US, our neighbors to the north, Canada, who like to brag about how well they can handle the cold, and even though the US is the 3rd biggest country on earth, they aren't the largest in North America. And Americans have to be sure to speak French if they're in the province of Quebec. Up until basically 2025, the United States and Canada historically have had a pretty solid friendship. They are both part of the NATO alliance, are part of the USMCA trade agreement, and share the largest land border on Earth. Our neighbors to the south are a top travel destination for Americans. You could split Americans into 3 broad groups when discussing how they feel towards Mexico. The relationship with our southern neighbor has been a bit more complicated over the centuries, including the Mexican-American War and numerous other U.S. military interventions. However, the 2 countries, despite conflicts on immigration, have grown together in recent decades, including both countries having the largest number of their respective residents being expats in the other country. The 2 countries are also economically and culturally integrated. 1/3 of Americans are indifferent to Mexico. They probably live thousands of miles away in the U.S. state of Iowa and have little concern about the effects that Mexico's existence has on the U.S. The other 1/3 of Americans are those that aren't big fans of Mexico. They may even hate Mexicans and the country of Mexico. Some even go so far as to engage in revisionism and try to erase any proof of Spanish or Mexican history or influence on the history of the United States and its culture. The final 1/3 of Americans are those that see Mexico as a brotherly country and a brotherly people. They hold deep admiration for our southern neighbor and the culture. These feelings may have come about because of family ties, business interests, living near the border, or a genuine feeling of friendship for the world's largest Spanish-speaking country. Arguably, one's feelings towards Mexico will influence their voting decisions, as opposed to one's feelings towards Canada. Anyway, in their own way, all 3 North American countries are powerful on their own, and when they join together, whether it is through military or economic agreements, this continent is nearly unstoppable when it comes to global affairs. What is the state of the country in 2026? Outside of the Civil War, the US is in one of its most divisive eras in its history. In the 1770s and 1780s, the Founding Fathers adopted a constitution called the Articles of Confederation. This government performed poorly though, so the Founding Fathers had to go back to the drawing board and create a new government. Their second attempt at forming a government was a little more successful. The current U.S. Constitution was established in 1787 and has been in effect since 1788. This country has seen 45 presidents across 47 presidencies. Countries the world over have tried emulating what the Founding Fathers did to varying degrees of success. Beyond politics, we are on the cusp of a technological revolution that may upend how our economy, government, and society are going to function. In 2022, American scientists developed a way for machines to basically think for themselves. Now, instead of performing manual tasks at the order of unhuman, AI technology can think and act independently of people. This has created much debate of what should the relationship be between man and machine. While American society has made great strides in race relations, there are still times when those tensions boil over and rise to the top of national discussion. America is the richest country in the history of the world. However, there is much consternation about how all that wealth should be divided. In the great economic and cultural battle between capitalism and communism during the 20th century, America was staunchly on the side of capitalism, if not the global leader of that bloc. However, like many things, not everything is in black and white. Since the end of the Cold War, there have been many capitalist countries that have experimented with some socialist policies and have actually been quite successful. The argument of today is, can that success for those specific programs be emulated in the United States? There is a growing divide between the wealthy elites and the rest of the population that is considerably less wealth. Since the American Revolution, there has been several other revolutions, like the French and Russian revolutions, which is, to put it very basically, the lower classes in those countries got frustrated with the wealthy elites and said the time and era for the wealthy elites is over. Do we want to be patient and wait for the crucial reforms that come with American democracy? Or does society want upheaval? One of the members of the billionaire class is even the president at the moment. He is doing everything in his power to, let's just say, be unique among the 45 presidents. However, despite current challenges, the United States has shown throughout its history that it is capable of achieving anything and fighting through adversity as long as the people within the country and the states remain united. Now that this founding father has a synopsis of what America is like in 2026, how do you think they will respond to this? I mean, this just scratches the surface when it comes to covering all 250 years of American history. When you look locally, every community and person has their own unique history as well. Considering all of this, will that founding father be bewildered and excited by what the United States becomes, or will they even be appalled? We know 250 years ago, they ultimately made the decision to vote for American independence, and thank God they did. Well, that is a short documentary on what America has become 250 years after independence. I thought I'd make a couple videos in dedication to and to celebrate this great country. So many of us nowadays get caught up in what's going on in politics that we forget to appreciate all of the good things that currently exist in this country and all of the achievements that have been accomplished over the centuries. I think it's irresponsible to deny that mistakes have been made along the way. Ethnic cleansing, slavery, civil war. However, we need to remember, when united and led with a positive vision for the future, this country can accomplish miracles, leaving slavery in the past and undertaking a gigantic economic transition to ensure everyone gets compensation for their labor, expansion of democracy and Republican ideals, putting the first human being on the moon. This is a nation with a long and complex history. Now it will be time to see what the future past 250 will bring America. Thank you for watching and have a great day.